I'd like to introduce once again Professor Mairéad Pratschke is going to be leading this panel for us, and I'll let her introduce her panelists, but they're going to be speaking today about algorithms and access, building scalable, ethical, and personalized learning. So go for it. Take it away.
All right, thank you. Hello, everybody. You look very familiar. Please tell me if I speak too loudly into the microphone today, and I will hold it further from my face. So we had a great warm-up yesterday, I think, on some of these topics, so I'm definitely ready to rock on this, but now we have a fantastic group to speak to the topic of algorithm and access, building scalable, ethical, personalized learning, the challenge of our age, I suppose I would say. So the description of this panel is basically as follows. We're going to look at, as it suggests, the challenges and opportunities of delivering truly personalized learning. We'll talk about what that means, first of all, to large audiences, because I think scale is really the challenge for us. Personalized is one thing, scaling ethically sound, pedagogically sound, personalized learning is another matter entirely. So I'm going to start quickly, because I know we don't have tons of time, by just introducing our illustrious panel. I think you've probably heard of this first gentleman on my right. Anant Agarwal is the Chief Open Education Officer of 2U and edX. He was the founder and CEO of edX, an online learning platform founded by Harvard and MIT. Anant taught the first edX course on circuits and electronics from MIT, which drew 155,000 students from 162 countries. He has served as the director of CSAIL, MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, and is a professor of electrical engineering and computer science at MIT. So thank you, Anant, for being here with us. Next on my list here is Courtney. Dr. Courtney Hills McBeth is the Chief Academic Officer and Provost at Western Governors University. You've just heard from Courtney in the last panel, and you can tell they're doing fantastic work there on competency-based learning. So I'll be asking her to share a little bit more about their approach, these innovative approaches for competency-based learning in particular, and how it relates to this panel discussion about access and algorithms. And last but not least, we have Francois. Bonjour, Francois, founder and president of the Learning Planet Institute, formerly the Center for Interdisciplinary Researches. He is an internationally renowned researcher in evolutionary systems biology who now devotes his time to learning and teaching sciences. Francois will speak for himself, but he advocates for large-scale collaboration to build, with the support of UNESCO notably and the UN University, a learning planet, and the development of learning communities working together to find sustainable solutions in the educational health sectors, as well as in the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Wow, that was a long mouthful. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with me as I introduce you. You all have too many accolades for me to get through quickly. Okay, so I'm going to jump straight into our key discussion points, and I'm going to start with you, Anant, if that's all right with you. The holy grail, I think we often hear about when we hear about AI and personalized learning is, of course, that we can do that. We can personalize everything kind of automatically, instantly with these large-scale platforms. So what I want to dig in today is the ethical side of that. How do we actually do that in an ethically sound way? So starting with you then, the promise of personalized learning is immense, as I've said. Its realization requires careful consideration of technology, pedagogy, and ethics. So as a pioneer in the field of open education and the former CEO of edX, how do you define personalized learning in the context of large-scale online learning? And what do you see as its most significant untapped potential for learners globally?
That was 3 questions in one.
So that's my style.
Let me just try to keep it simple. In my mind, personalized learning tries to mimic the kind of teaching and learning you might have if you had a tutor or a teacher who knew you very well. And so that part, where the tutor knows you very well, brings out what is the sort of a deeply personal part of personalized learning, where they can teach you in a way that knows you, that knows your background. In the previous panel, we had a conversation about soccer versus baseball, and how examples that you pick would depend on your background. So if a truly personalized teacher were teaching Courtney, she would use soccer examples, and teaching me, they would use cricket examples. So that's one part of personalized learning. People often confuse adaptive learning with personalized learning. Adaptive learning is a part of personalized learning, where adaptive learning is much more about the pace of your learning, where if you know something, your teacher can say, oh, you already know this, let me move faster or slower. So the adaptive part is is more knowing you in the recent past in terms of what you've learned, but the deep part of personalized learning is knowing you as a person, what motivates you using examples that are you. So I think those are the two big aspects of personalized learning, the adaptivity and the deeply personal part.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to go down to Francois next. At the Learning Planet Institute, you're deeply involved in learning and teaching sciences. How can learning science fundamentally inform the design of truly adaptive and effective personalized learning experiences, moving past just content delivery towards fostering deeper understanding and engagement?
I'll add the ethic point that is in the title of our panel as well in your question. I think we need to have not only personalized learning that is optimized for the world of today, but ethical in the sense that not only it protects the privacy of the students, of course, but it goes beyond this. Can we make sure that we are training ethical 21st century planetizen, citizens of the planet, that are truly aware that, if our planet is in such a bad shape, it's not that people want to destroy it, it's that some of the solutions of our problems of yesterdays are actually creating some problems for tomorrow. Okay? And so we have all cognitive blind spots. And it's very hard to think about, say, the 17 dimensions of the Sustainable Developmental Goals of the United Nations. It's even hard to remember more than 10 digits. So how do you grasp the complexity of our world, and how do you make sure that the people you train are going to have a positive legacy on themselves, on their communities, on the planet for the future generations? Actually, the United Nations has signed a pact for the future that says none of us should take a decision that will have a negative impact on future generations. Okay? That's a good intent, but in practice, how do we do this? Yeah. Okay, we are not there yet. And so how do we learn as individuals, whatever our age, to do this? Okay? And so how do we open our eyes to our cognitive blind spots, and how can we become, say, good enough ancestors that have a positive footprint? Okay, so how do we get that skill? So there is the skills of the labor market and of immediate needs. For sure, we need those, but you also need the skills that will, make the planet sustainable for our children and grandchildren and so on. Okay, so we have to make sure that when we develop this personalized learning, we do it in a way that is positive for ourselves and help us even to know ourselves. Know thyself, is a very ancient concept. Today, the AI that sells you ad knows you better than you know yourself. Okay? So can we use this technology at the service of the learner? So that the learners can start to know themselves better, and they can learn to have a meaningful impact on themselves, on their community, on the planet for the future. So we have to use AI to help us, come away from lots of those blind spots. And, instead of having an AI that's just here to answer your question, for instance, what about an AI that questions you? Okay? I mean, Socrates knew about this. And, it didn't end very well. Asking questions is not always very well tolerated by the powerful that don't want to be questioned. But indeed, we have to question the world because our current trajectory is obviously not the right one. Okay? So we have to develop that ability to question. And for instance, you want to build a personalized learning trajectory where you can learn to solve the challenges that are the most meaningful to you and your community and for the future. Okay? And to do that, technologies, disciplines, skills are at the service of your ability to solve those complex challenges without creating more problems. Okay? And you can use AI to guide you in that process as meaningful tutors that help you to, for instance, if for those of you that know what's the ikigai, which is at the intersection between the world needs, your personal needs, your community needs, but also the resources you have and the resource your community have, you can use the AI to help you find your ikigai and to identify people that share a similar commitment to this challenge and which have basically the same dreams you have, okay? So, we were discussing before, what if we had a GPS for dreams that help us to identify where we are in dream space, where are others in dream space, how many people here share the same dream, can we connect them so that together they're more likely to build a common dream and a common future. But what about the negative effect of some people's dreams? Because I don't know if you've noticed, a few people's dreams create nightmares for everyone else. Okay, so clearly this ethical dimension should be there even in dream space, even in project space, in learning space, because you want to foster the self-compatible dreams that we can co-construct together without creating nightmares for none of our generations or none of the future generations.
Okay, we've got a lot there to work with. Thank you very much. We've gone from pedagogy to nightmare dreams. So I think that sums up AI, which is wonderful. So, okay, I'm going to ask a tricky question, but first I'm going to give Courtney some time to speak, and I'm probably going to ask all three of you to address probably the stickiest question when it comes to algorithms and access and equity. But Courtney, before we kind of do an all-rounder question, let me ask you specifically about WGU, because you're doing something different from a lot of other institutions. How are you using technology specifically to support competency-based learning? And I don't mean Francois has outlined some wonderful lofty goals. I want the answer to the question, how are you doing it? Not what do you want to do, but how are you doing it? How are you working with the technology to actually create and enable this competency-based learning? What is the architecture, et cetera, that is underlying the system there?
So we've invested heavily into our data infrastructure, which has become quite robust, that captures our student engagement and how a student progresses within a course and across term to term and within their academic program. So we have this comprehensive view of a student journey and a progressive and persistent profile of the student along the student journey. We've also, to make this ecosystem actionable, we've built an API-driven integration layer where we have various APIs that connect into our ecosystem. And then secondly, we've built our architecture around a service-oriented architecture. And we have, to date, which is constantly changing, 847 different applications that are connecting into this architecture. And then we also have an event-driven architecture where we can then trigger certain digital nudges or human touch points and outreach, a call, a text, email, et cetera, from faculty based on how a student's doing. And so we have various self-service enrollment. We have a Trailheads initiative, which is helping students start at the right point or the right trail, if you will, whether that's directly into a degree program or starting with a universal type learner course to help level them up. And then we also have a Learner 360 dashboard that all the faculty can view that's helping them understand how and where a student's doing. And perhaps a very concrete example is we now have the data on a student where we know if they are about to attempt an assessment, and if they fail that assessment, their propensity to drop goes up. So before they attempt that assessment, then they would get an outreach from faculty to say, you know, of these 5 competencies, you're really strong in these 3, but let's work on these 2 before you take the assessment. So that's a really concrete example of our pre-assessment engine that's just in the works that has started to drive double-digit improvements in assessment, attempt, and pass rates.
Thank you very much. Okay, that was your warm-up. Now I'm going to get into the tricky questions. So when we talk about AI and personalized learning and equity, the nightmare, I think, is that it is it's extraordinarily difficult. In fact, it's impossible. You can't have AI without data. You can't monitor student outcomes and student progress without access to that data. Learning analytics means understanding what they're doing and their interactions online. What is the line for each of the 3 of you between personalized learning, effective personalized learning, and too much monitoring, too much surveillance, too much intrusion in personal lives? The reason I ask that is because I'm thinking a lot about the last panel and the fact that we were talking about global ambitions. And a lot of the way AI is used regionally is region specific. So we're here in France now and we're in the EU. So in the EU, we have the EU AI Act where there are very different levels of AI use that has been deemed appropriate, right? So for example, using facial recognition technology is not allowed under the EU AI Act. And in fact, all AI applications, I believe, someone can probably correct me, in education have been designated high risk in the EU. That means, therefore, certain technologies are okay in Canada and the US, but they're not in France or other countries. So where is the line? How do you decide what is okay to monitor? Where do you decide to draw that line between personal invasion and learning effectiveness and what we need to know about people's habits so we can predict and we can help them? Anant, I'll start with you.
Sure. The good news here is that we've all had a lot of experience with social tools and online tools. And whether they do a good job or not, I don't know. But we have some guardrails. So for example, I was wandering around Montmartre last night, and I was using Google services. And so there, it said, hey, can I track your location just while you're using my app, or only once, or forever? And I was given a choice as to how my location could be tracked. And if Google could track my location, it could tell me, aha, there's an amazing steak place here. Or this is a place where you get spectacular gin and tonics. So it could particularize the kind of things that I got. And so therefore, I have to give up something in order to gain something. So I think we can use the same principles in education, particularly with online learning. With online learning, on edX, for example, every single mouse click is being captured. And learner data, we have a very, very clearly articulated and well thought out policy on learner privacy and how we share data or not, and so on. And there have been a number of experiments over the years. Harvard, for example, did a completely adaptive course on Earth and planet science. From MIT, Una Mae O'Reilly did work on personalizing to students who were about to drop out. So there have been quite a few experiments using the detailed amount of data that is captured by a digital platform. So digital platforms enable personalized learning in a very rich and deep way. The harder part of personalized learning is the deeply personal part that I talked about. There, the platform cannot capture every mouse click of mine. So while platforms can do adaptive learning pretty easily, but the deeply personal part is hard. There, the platform somehow needs to know from me that I like cricket, while Courtney likes soccer. And so those are the parts where I have to willingly provide the data to the system. And so there, it's pretty clear. The system cannot magically divine that data. Somehow I have to provide it, or it has to go and scrape my social networks unbeknownst to me. But either way, there has to be some permission granted.
Great, thank you for that. Courtney, any thoughts?
Sure, I'll just actually point to a concrete example, which is at WGU in this last year, we will do over 1.5 million assessments. And we use a technology company to proctor these assessments, which utilize a front-facing camera. And this has been a major sticking point on the point of personalized learning, to where we actually switched to a different company because we wanted to provide much more personalized proctoring experience and of course reduce cheating, et cetera. And in this, particularly for our students who have multiple generations who are living in a household, there's people in a space. If you're in a small apartment and you have grandparents, parents, kids, not having someone in the space is actually really hard, and our students have to they have to show the room in which they're taking the exam to ensure that there's no one else in the room. And some of our students felt uncomfortable with that. That's their personal space, and or they might be embarrassed by their conditions, or all sorts of things. Or if a woman's wearing hijab, they can do that. As opposed to a male wearing a baseball cap, they might be cheating on the... So there's all sorts of cultural, personal, familial expectations when it comes to just this one aspect of proctoring exams that we've really been wrestling with, with being student-obsessed, tech-enabled. How do you balance that line or that zone of personal and privacy versus a standard of rigor and validity, et cetera.
That's really interesting. Thank you. I was just thinking, I was in the UK until quite recently, and there, the university I was at, they made the decision not to use a certain type of proctoring technology, but in other places, of course, they do, right? So it's sometimes it's just down to the institution, right? But we
heard last night at dinner, the Spanish example of a proctoring company that does the front-facing laptop camera and then using the phone device behind you so that you get the 360 view. And so, I mean, even in our context, I thought, okay, this is interesting. Is that maybe another element that we would want to implement? And then that has all sorts of implications when you're serving 300,000 students within one academic year, the cost, the complexity, the et cetera. So it's complicated when you work at scale as well. Like we talk about scale, and we're operating at scale, and any sort of wanting to push and change and innovation is always there, and changes that are made. A pilot for us is 10,000 students.
Yeah. Wow.
So getting that right, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that.
Absolutely. No, that's brilliant. Thank you. See, I knew if I asked a tricky question, I'd get right into some good discussion on the ethics. Before I move on to another general one, Francois, I want to come back to what you said about dreams and nightmares. And again, thinking about this global and local. So you're based in France, but you're doing global work. Back to things like, the EU AI Act versus other places. How are you drawing that line between how you use learning analytics, or how are you going to use analytics generally, data generally, to help map people and find those people who are sharing the same dream around the world? How are you navigating the space between, again, privacy and, let's say, creating community in your learning institute?
Yeah, that's a very good question. First, I believe that the students should own its own data. And that, those data should be portable so that, if they go from one learning institution to another, they, get their data and they're going to be able to use it throughout their life and throughout the various physical, digital environments that they're going to travel. I think that's super important. And so, the more the data is basically in your phone or in your computer, and you transfer only the piece of data that you agree to transfer for a given purpose, because, clearly surveillance technology can be the nightmare, and de facto dictatorships are very, very good at using this data to oppress, okay? And I think we all know, especially today, that going from a democracy to a dictatorship may be much faster than what people would have wished. Okay, so I think we have to be super cautious with these things. And indeed, dream can become nightmare if suddenly these data that were yours are out there used to control you or to impose on you things that you wouldn't want to be imposed on you. Okay, whether it's an advertisement, whether it's whatever. Okay, so I think we have to be very aware of these dimensions, and I think what we try to do systematically is co-design everything we do with the students. So I like very much your student-centered, but for us, we started around a very small table about that size. We double in size every 18 months for nearly 20 years, because everything we've done was co-designed by students for students. And for instance, to give you one example of what we are trying to push now, is, I guess many people in the room know what's a Model UN. If you don't, raise your hand, so I'll explain. But Model UN is basically a simulation of the United Nations. Okay? And millions of students do this every year. And at the moment, it retains very locally. Okay? What we want to do is co-design an AI suite of tools to help the students before, during, and after that exercise. And the downstream could be, can we bring their ideas on the way the world should be run, make the local synthesis, the regional synthesis, the national, the international, the planetary synthesis, and bring this to the various decision makers along the way. Okay? So then, when the UN says they don't want to take decisions that are not in the best interest of next generations, we can say, well, here is what next generations want. Okay? And we can be in this conversation because that's a part of their information that they are ready to share because they want to have a positive influence on tomorrow. Okay, so if we are what Taiwan called broad listening, okay, broadcasting everyone knows it's one to many. Okay, broad listening is just the opposite. It's many to the one that is about to take the decision is going to impact all of us. We want to be heard on what could be the positive or negative effect of that decision. And so we want to be able to co-construct. And so there are technology to do this. They're called civic tech, they're called police, whatever their names. We can co-design those technologies with the youth, and they can be part not only of sharing their data for improving whatever specific things, but their brains, their motivations, their dreams and nightmares could be taken into account to co-design the better futures that they want.
Okay, thank you. This is really interesting.
Actually,
Yeah,
add to that, I just want to push us on our thinking of student data and from a very practical lens. And so we talk about students owning their data, which we believe in. But I think about the student data in two layers, actually. The top would be the student engagement data within the course and how they're progressing through the student journey. Now, institutions want to see and own that. And as an online university, we're using lots of different application layers. And so being able to extract that data, bring it into a data lake, and understand that holistically is quite complex. We also, institutions, universities usually don't do a good job of actually then displaying those data to students so they understand how they're progressing through a course and through their entire academic program. And so in that instance, it's really important for universities to own and see that data, but then reflect it back to students on their progress. Now, the second layer of student data would be the actual skill that they've earned, the credential, the certificate that they've earned, and in the US context, most universities hold those data hostage. And that's not okay, and that's where we get into learner employment records, and we've created an achievement wallet that we're rolling out to all of our students where they could then own the credential, the certificate, the course completion to be able to then demonstrate to an employer so that they could get promotions while they're still learning in an academic program and or take it portably with them. And so I think I just push us all when we think about the student data of the practical application and instance of each of those and the nuance around it, because it's too broad to just say student data.
Absolutely, and I think it's also worth pointing out that predictive AI has been around for a while. Schools were using predictive AI to talk about, to forecast and predict how students might do. I mean, I know the institution I was at the US was using it in the mid-2010s, for example.
We use it really well in enrollment data to drive enrollment, but not for student success. So that's where there's been a huge miss, is it's been driven mostly out of enrollment shops and not across faculty and schools and driving student success.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I was just trying to make the point that, the Web 2 and the Web 3, we've been doing a lot of that already in principle, and also when you think about credentialing and the whole open badge movement, again, that's been around for 2011 was it? It started with Mozilla? I mean, it's been around for a while. So this is just the latest iteration of using AI to do this more effectively. Anant, do you want to speak to any of this? Because we've had a lot now going on in the last few minutes about the way the data is used and how dreams and nightmares happen. You look like you might want to say something about that.
Yeah, I was hoping to stay quiet because my views are very different from
No, please.
Everybody on the panel on this, and are pretty radical, and I think I may get booed out of the room. All of us, I don't see any teenagers in the room here, and I'm certainly elderly, and I think we think differently. We think of data, like my personal data, as something wholly sanctified and deep and important and all of that stuff. But the teenagers think completely differently. They, my daughter and I, a family, were out on vacation a few months ago, and as we're walking around, my daughter, who's no longer a teenager, but certainly was a teenager in the age of when all these disruptions were happening, they just willy-nilly shared their data, whether it's Google Photos or they just willy-nilly give all of these applications complete access to the data, their whereabouts, the whole thing, and they say, and they tell me, Dad, if you think your stuff is going to be private, dream on. but just assume that everybody knows everything. We will get into a world where everybody knows everything. Get with it, get with the program, and then let AI help. Hopefully there'll be some ethical people around that will be careful in how the data is used. But AI and many of the systems, digital learning, AI, cannot do squat if they don't have access to a lot of data, not just your data, but data of a lot of people that are also learning like you, because then you can optimize and do so much better for humanity. So my view on that is just give up on data access and just embrace it and hope that technologists are good people.
Do you know what? I'm so glad you said that, because I was going to give an example and I thought, is this going to make me very unpopular? So you literally just beat me to the punch. What I was going to say was, same thing, teenagers, I mean, I've got 5 nieces and nephews, they do not care about data privacy. So that's the first thing. Some do, but most, they'll give it up to have access to whatever they want. But it's not just teenagers. Do you guys remember when DeepSeek was released? What did everybody do? Oh, I want to be the first to test out DeepSeek on my phone. Did anybody read the T's and C's for DeepSeek? Nobody. And then a few weeks later, when there was another Chinese app that people, a few weeks later, then said, don't download that app, everyone had already downloaded it and used it. Oh, I remember, it was when TikTok went down for a day or two. And everybody went to the TikTok version, the Chinese TikTok version, Red Book, I believe it's called. So that's the first thing I noticed. It's definitely generational, but the other thing I've very much noticed, and I'd love your commentary, probably Anant on this, but maybe both of you as well, global and local. So I've spent the last 3 years in the UK, where everyone is freaking out about data privacy. Then I went to Spain and I met a bunch of people from Brazil, and they said to me, we're not that worried about that, but we'd like to know what it costs. Is it about access? Is it about privacy? What is it? I think it is regional, a lot of this. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Whether it's this is generational, these feelings about ethics. I know this is quite controversial, but I spent 3 years at a UK university where every academic was worried about data privacy, and the students were walking around on TikTok. How do you reconcile that? Are we telling them how to live and maybe they don't want to?
No, very quickly, I think it's very regional as well.
Yeah.
I grew up in India, spent a lot of time in India.
Yeah.
And the way the Eastern world thinks about this and the Western world thinks about it is completely different. In India, people don't care a squat about your data or their data. It is shocking. People will give you free email lists from applications of millions of users, including all their personal information. You don't even have to buy it, you can actually get it. While in the US, they'll pay you $50 for each data record that you get. So I think it's very regional and it's very personal. And maybe in these in the Eastern countries, it's much more let's just give everything up because one, people have it anyway, and second, maybe they want to give it up for the global good. I don't know.
So it's very good then, Francois, for example, that you said yours is student-centered, co-designed. You've talked to students. What are students saying?
Obviously, it depends on where they are. You take an Afghan woman, she may not want to share her learning data with the Taliban. Okay, so there may be countries where working on climate was fine, and it's not fine anymore. Being educated about gender equity was fine, and it's not fine anymore. Okay, so I think you may want to be aware that depending on the freedom that the society offers you, suddenly your perspective on this might change very fast. You may, in a century ago in Germany, the data on your religion, you may or may not want to share it with the Nazis. Okay, so I mean, those are basically questions that we have to be aware of, and it's, our world is not necessarily going in the directions of more democracies. Okay, that's why I really like Taiwan, and I'll just make 1 minute on this. The trust in democracy in Taiwan went from 9% to 70% in the last 10 years. If you know of any other country that did as well, let me know. Okay, and so our ability to protect democracy is a fight. And so, in terms of all these questions, it was very interesting. We had the AI summit in Paris, actually very close to here. We had a conference where some Harvard professors say there is 3 people embodying the future of AI and its impact on society. Okay, there was Peter Thiel, I guess you all know him. There was Sam Altman, I guess you all know him. And there was Audrey Tang. And Audrey Tang, for those that don't know, was the digital minister for Taiwan. And she advocates for a plurality, not a singularity. Okay, a plurality of perspective where we have open data, open software, open solutions, and we co-create open democracies at all scales in order to make sure that we are not dominated. And I think the Taiwanese, for instance, they wouldn't want mainland China to have access to all of their data.
So I think you've just basically, is my microphone still on? Yes? Okay, sorry. You've really just, underlined the point about global, local, regional. AI, I think anyone who follows AI development knows that LLMs reflect the values of the creators, and that's why we need multicultural, multilingual, global AI. The question, again, is always how? How do we do it? How do we create it? And how do we implement it in a way that honors the values? And who decides, whether it's about the generations or whether it's about the regions? Yeah. Courtney, you look ready to answer.
I would just want to add one more dimension to that, which seems highly salient and relevant now, which is it corporations owning the data, or is it government, and or both, and how do those two interact?
This was not going to be a panel on geopolitics, but absolutely. We're seeing the geopolitics of the situation is unfolding around us, right? We know that the drive for AI sovereignty is really an AI arms race right now. And I think places like Open edX, this conference, these are the opportunities to connect with the values that we actually want, which are the values of openness, collaboration, sharing, over this nationalism that is being cloaked as AI sovereignty, which is really about competition to stay ahead. For lots of good reasons as well, but also it could go the wrong way. So lest we end on a very dark note, because I was thinking, if anyone hasn't read the book Nexus yet by Noah Harari, you should read it, because it's all about the history of how this technology can go one way or another. But I think the message in there, and I think what you didn't quite get to, but you were hopefully alluding to, is that this comes down to human nature and human choices. Whether we go for democracy or totalitarianism is up to us. AI is here. How we use it is up to us. What we do with open platforms is up to us. These are human decisions, and I think they really come down to AI literacy. And as we talked about a lot yesterday too, learning to use the technology. So on that note, from each of you, I would like a short 30 seconds to 60-second answer to this question. What is one actionable insight or powerful message you can give the group that you can take away about the future for open platforms like Open edX and AI integration regarding this whole topic of equity, access, algorithms? What would you like to see happen, or what is your message in 60 seconds or less for the group? I'll start with Anant. Anant.
In my case, it's very simple, and if you haven't figured it out yet, my whole life has been about open access. In 2013, we open sourced the edX platform as Open edX. There were big debates as to whether to do it or not, and there were a lot of people, naysayers, that said, no, it should be proprietary. I have 3 courses from MIT on edX on circuits and electronics. Those courses are completely open source. Anybody can take the content and pretty much do what they want with it, as long as they put the new innovations back. So my one principle there is that share. Openly, if you build any code or software using AI, share it as open source.
Wonderful. I love that message. Courtney?
Anant, thank you for making that decision, and WGU is definitely excited to be sharing much more of our tech capabilities with the community. I'll share one thing that I've taken away from this conference, which is our competency-based education model is based on flexibility and personalizing learning across time, place, and pace. And I think what I'm now going to add to that is this contextual element based on your talk yesterday and these conversations, which is truly personalized learning is not only providing personalization of time when you can study, place, where you can study, pace, being able to go at your own pace, but also this notion of fully contextualized learning and using AI and digital technology to fully contextualize learning and make it much more personalized.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great answer. And Francois, the last word for you. 60 seconds or less.
I think co-designing with the next generation. I think that's the key for me. 50% of humanity is below 30. I don't know many people in the room. But 1% of decision makers are below 30. Okay. If the elder decision makers we are always taking the wisest possible decisions for the future, that could be fine. I'm not sure this is the case, okay? So how do we rebalance? And, you know, you have a distribution of age on every one of your platforms. Make sure that the youngest one's voice is being heard when you design for them, design with them. You know, what the young people said is basically nothing for us without us. And the UN Secretary General answered, there is 4 ways to interact with youth: ignore them, pretend to listen to them, and you know, the UN and many others have done this for too long, according to him. You have to dialogue with them, or you co-construct the future with them. And that's the 4th one, where we need some sort of collective R&D that is co-designed with them, for them. You know, one quote, and I'll end. There was a young lady at the last General Assembly at the UN. She says, I want to learn to be the change I want to see in the world. So how do we co-design with them the learning ecosystem that enable this?
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you all very much for that. And I would also just like to say that we had a script, but we left it quite quickly. So thank you to my panelists for going with the flow and allowing me to take you off into questions that you had not anticipated. I think that was a really interesting discussion. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please give our panel a hand.
All right, I believe we have time for 1 or 2 questions.
I'm going to start over here this time.
Thank you very much for your insights. Speaking as industry representative, in the world of adaptive, hyper-personalized, dynamic learning, how do we now assess credentials? That's for the entire panel.
So is this about credentialing in the world of personalized learning?
So we've had some good conversations about this. In the context of WGU, I'll just give you a concrete example. We have very much kept our assessment practice separate from our building and teaching courses, and we're moving into a space now where with AI technologies, we can actually run students through real-world problem-based, scenario-based simulations and build the assessment within those experiences. And for us, even though our model's only 30 years old, we are already innovating and thinking about the evolution of assessment within our current context. So right now, where everything is summative and proctored at the end, we may be moving into a space where there are courses and modules where the assessment is built in, and it's a holistic assessment that's monitoring and tracking and evaluating a student's learning experience as they go throughout a course.
If I can add something very quick. When you have personalized learning, assessment, as you know, it goes away. Today, we have 2 phases, learning and assessment. And assessment is this nasty thing with proctoring and exams, and you get into a cold sweat when you, all of that stuff. But with personalized learning, just think about it. If AI and the tutor knows all about you anyway, then what the heck is this final assessment about anyway? It knows about you. So after a few months or weeks or days, it knows, are you ready or not? And so one fine day, it'll say, okay, you're done, go on. And so assessment is kind of built into the fabric of the teaching and learning, and there's no concept of assessment anymore. It's simply, are you ready? Are you competent? And suddenly one day you are.
So just to complete the way at least we're trying to do it, we don't aim to have the best students in the world. We would like them to be the best versions of themselves for the world. Okay? So we want them to understand what are the commons of this planet, the natural commons, the intellectual commons, and the digital commons, and we want them to contribute to the commons and to have an open contribution. So, you know, they wrote an open source piece of code, they produced some open data, they've produced open education resource, you know, there is a proof of work, okay? And that proof of work can be evaluated by anyone in the community in real time. You know, why would you hire a coder? Because he's a good coder, and that's, you know, it's not because he passed the test, it's because you can check his code, okay? That's the sort of logic in which we are, is, you know, why you want a good movie maker? Because they make good movies. You just watch the movie and you wonder whether it was well done or not. So you basically ask proof of work rather than proof of test, okay? So rather than having students compete on yesterday's knowledge, we want them to cooperate onto this challenge so that they contribute to build the commons of tomorrow.
I just have a question for the room that's been vexing me, that this is a good place to ask the question, which is, in most contexts, whether it's your organization or we talked about MIT, when we talk about AI, we're saying AI tutor. To me, this comes from the construct of being in traditional higher ed, where there's a hierarchy of faculty from adjunct to associate, tenure, et cetera, or clinical faculty. Like, is there a world where an AI is actually a professor? Like, why are we all using the AI tutor as the word and the construct?
There actually is. I'll just answer that. There are tests of that happening already, and I don't know if you remember, but the one thing I showed yesterday was co-instructor. Yeah. So I mean, there are examples of these teaching presences. Anant, do you want to say anything as well? Or?
Sure. I think to the higher level point, we sort of create the world that we live in, and at least initially, AI is going to look like the world that we live in. There will be AI tutors, because today there are professors and teachers. But I think in the longer term, I think this is where you were going, Courtney. In the longer term, I think there'll be personalized learners, I guess, where learners will kind of learn, and AI will be in the environment, and they simply learn better. And there may not be a concept of a tutor as such, but it may just be that they're learning better somehow.
I don't remember which AI company CEO said it, but one of the big three, made a comment and said that, kids would have an AI kind of companion for life. And again, that's a horror for some people, but for learning, it's wonderful if you're fine with that analytical side of it. They know what you need to know, they know what you need to learn, they know what you already know, and as per the stuff we talked about yesterday, yeah, I completely agree. We're not going to separate it into learning and assessment anymore. It's all part of the same learning as process, which is, again, not a new concept. So hopefully that's where we're going. Any other questions from the room?
Yeah, one more, yeah.
Yeah, it's not so much a question as a remark. I really enjoyed that conversation on collecting data and privacy, so thank you for that, Mairead. And I really enjoyed your answer, Courtney, about the fact that whatever data that we collect, we need to expose it to students. And I think that we as a community, engineers, product managers, whenever we design data collection tools, then we should make sure that this data is also directly useful to students by exposing this data. Anyway, but I also want to say that I strongly disagree with the fact that we should assume that teenagers don't care about about the fact that people are watching what they say. Everybody needs a safe space, especially in learning environments. And if online learning wants to emulate offline learning, then we need to preserve those safe spaces where maybe student-to-student interactions can happen, and they know that they are not being watched. And maybe students can ask questions to a teacher and be confident that this conversation is going to stay between themselves. And we don't have that as a feature in our online platforms, and I think that's a shame.
I would actually love to give an example of this. We've started one-to-many, where students can come in and learn within a peer cohorting situation, and my faculty's going crazy. They're like, no, we want the data we want in there, and I'm saying no. Like, our students are telling us they want this space, so that's attention. And then also what we're seeing, though, on the flip side, right, it's never just black and white. On the flip side, we're seeing all of a sudden assessments that come through where students are not passing a set of questions, and then we can relate that back into these peer learning environments. They're actually not teaching the concept correctly and or steering students the wrong way, for example. So it's often not one or the other, but it's very complex.
I think it's also just worth mentioning that slightly offhand remark was about what we see in their personal, I think, habits around the world, the TikTok generation. And it is worth noting that, of course, in a learning environment, yes, you need a safe space, and on campus you have that. And of course, in online, by definition, it's about analytics. That's how it works. That's also what we use to leverage all that, the power of the platform. So maybe that's the choice, splitting it into those if certain people want certain things. Yep.
I think it's really important for you all to realize that you all are the experts, and we all sit in seats of leadership, and I would just encourage all of you and hope that you work at organizations where there's this level of transparency and ability to communicate with your leaders, but you all are at the cutting edge of this and need to be managing up, if you will, to the leaders of your organization to push these critical ethical issues that we've talked about here today, because you are at the cutting edge, and my guess is that many of your organizations, your leaders really want and need to hear from you about these critical issues.
Go that. And I think we're probably out of time now. It's 12, so I'm sure people are hungry. So again, if you could just give a round of applause, gratitude to our panel. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I know you want to go to lunch. Just hold on. Hold on 1 minute. I promise you get food. I have just one last thing for everybody, which is I wanted to show you guys a video to highlight all of the women that are in our community that have done amazing work throughout the years. We've put together a little thank you for all of their hard work.
Improving processes and collaborating in the product working group.
He has been designing the Indigo theme plugin,
helping to manage platform-related projects and contributions.
I've been especially proud of designing new mobile features,
leading LTI redesign,
helping organizations to successfully adopt open ethics.
I actually helped to shape OKRs with real milestones.
Helped develop open ethics marketing approach.
I've been training clients on how to build courses in Studio
that enables users to install Tutor plugins with just one click.
I collect real feedback from users and share it with the community.
From translation support for Xblocks to learner analytics to most recently the modular learning and reusable content.
I help document the product review process so contributors know exactly how to get new features reviewed and merged.
McBeth config API, which facilitates the micro front-end runtime configuration.
Started with the marketing working group, and also last year in Stellenbosch I started with the BitStaff working group.
At the 2016 conference, there was only a few of us, but now we're everywhere.
Your perspective over here is not just welcome, it's very, very much needed.
Your voice matters, your ideas matters.
Your perspective is needed.